Time now for the Easy Choice presented by Geico. I'm Jamie Eisberg. That's Dave Rich. We're taking a look at some starts and sits for week number 8, Dave. And let's go where we always go, the start of the week, and let's see if you can keep this momentum going and have another successful player that we're highlighting this week. And look, it's been a fun story so far watching C.J. Stroud perform in the way that he's been able to operate as the rookie quarterback for the Texans. And now he gets to stick it to the team that might have made a mistake by not taking him #1 overall. Bryce Young, the #1 overall pick. Not exactly a great fantasy quarterback, not exactly a great reality quarterback as well. Stroud's been a very good fantasy quarterback. 4 of his last 5 games, 18 or more points. 3 of those games over 24 points. And you're taking on a Panthers team that just put 2 more defenders on IR. Gross Matos, one of their key pass rushers. Jeremy Chin, one of their better secondary players. Safety for them. And we've seen the last 2 quarterbacks that they've faced score at least 26 fantasy points with Jared Goff and Tua Tagovailoa. So I think C.J. Stroud is going to stick it to the Panthers a little bit and show them what they might have missed out. We obviously all like him as a #1 quarterback. You're a little bit lower, though. Not so much sold on C.J. Stroud?
There are must-start quarterbacks and there are maybe-start quarterbacks, and he's toward the top of the maybe-start quarterbacks. And I was actually nervous about C.J. Stroud when I started looking into the matchup, how much zone coverage the Panthers play, and then I saw that pass rush. The Panthers have the lowest pass rush pressure rate of any team in the NFL. When Stroud has time, he's money, and therefore he is a top 12 quarterback this week.
And you say must-start guys. If we were talking must-start guys, everybody's starting those guys. So that's why we always stick to the maybe-start guys when we talk about the starts of the week. All right, let's get into some other starts for us. I'll go first, and you can see the list of players that we like on the site, cbssports.com, with the start-sit column. But here we go for the 5 starts that we're going to highlight here. Jared Goff, Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Pierce, another member of the Texans. By the way, Robert Woods not going to play for Houston. He is missing this week's game, so could be good news for Nico Collins, and Tank Dell's coming back. Garrett Wilson and Josh Palmer. So let's stay with the Texans here and talk about Damian Pierce. He's been awful. He has absolutely been one of the bigger busts for fantasy managers so far this season, but I do think this is going to be one of his better games because the Panthers not only stink against the pass, they stink against the run. And I know the last time we saw Damian Pierce, he was playing essentially behind Devin Singletary. Singletary played more snaps in the Week 6 loss against the Saints. However, win against the Saints. However, we're looking at a situation where the majority of the season, Damian Pierce has been their guy. We've said all along, this is the landing spot you're looking for Damian Pierce. They give up the most touchdowns to the position in only 6 games, 13 total touchdowns, and 7 running backs, 7 have gotten to at least 12 or more PPR points. I think this is going to be Pierce's best game.
Well, I hope you're right. I've got him on a bunch of leagues, and he was one of my breakout players to begin the season. What I like about the situation for Houston is that they're coming off the bye. That offensive line probably at its healthiest point this entire season. We'll see what kind of wrinkles they put in during the bye to either help Damian Pierce or put him in a 50-50 split with Devin Singletary. It's going to be an exploratory game for them. I can't say I love Damian Pierce as much as you do.
I actually hope both guys do well because, again, matchup's favorable. They should win this game, and maybe Singletary gets some opportunities also.
Can they both do well and Stroud still get over 20 fantasy points?
Throw to score, run to win. I think that's what we'll see from the Texans in this matchup. I also think we're going to get a big game from Garrett Wilson, who, you know, despite the flaws with the quarterback position, Zach Wilson has still helped Garrett Wilson 14 or more PPR points in 4 of 6 games. And this is going to be another game where he has success. Here are the #1 wide receivers who have done well against the Giants so far this season. Every one of them since week 2. Marquise Brown, 17.4 PPR points. Deebo Samuel, 25 PPR points. DK Metcalf, 12 PPR points. Tyreek Hill, 32 PPR points. Stephon Diggs, 20 PPR points. Terry McLaurin, 15 PPR points. Get ready to add Garrett Wilson's name to that list, 15+ PPR points. He's going to destroy the Giants in this crosstown rivalry because I think it means something to him. He's coming off a huge game against the Eagles. Zach Wilson has not been as bad for Garrett Wilson as we thought.
But yet he's still off target on 31% of his throws to Garrett Wilson. It does matter. You're taking away a third of his throws from being catchable.
It's taking away the ceiling, but the floor has still been excellent.
Okay, I'll agree with you on that. In PPR. Like, he's in that flex range for me in PPR. Non-PPR, I don't want anything to do with him.
All right, I think he's going to destroy the Giants. Let's talk about some starts for you here as we take a look at your list. And sticking with a former Texans player as we continue the Houston Texans theme, you got Deontay Foreman on this list as one of the running backs, along with Gus Edwards, Terry McLaurin, Drake London, and Nico Collins, the wide receiver for Houston. So let's start with Deontay Foreman because we're getting some questions about what happens when Roschon Johnson comes back. Is Deontay Foreman still going to be the lead guy? And will he have that success like we saw last week with 3 total touchdowns?
I think we will. He played only 50% of the snaps last week, sharing with Darrington Evans. If Roschon comes back, that just means he's sharing with Roschon. And I liked what I saw from him, especially working near the goal line, 5 of 7 snaps inside the 10. And the Chargers, Jamie, the Chargers have allowed at least 13 PPR points to Every single starting running back, literally every running back that's had at least 10 carries against them this year has come through with 13 PPR points. That's your floor for D'Onta Foreman, who had 3 catches from Tyson Bagent last week. Number 2 fantasy running back.
Big game coming for him. Gus Edwards, great matchup as well. And some of those receivers you saw on Dave's list, Drake London has done great. You know, the thing I like about Drake London is we've seen 11 PPR points from him last week.
Yep.
And we started to say that's a bad game. You know, so that's a good thing.
Yes, that's true.
To see.
And he should have had at least 1 touchdown in that game, if not 2. He's getting those red zone opportunities in the Atlanta offense. I think he keeps it up.
I think you're right. Let's talk about some sits for you this week. And a guy we differ on a little bit here is Darrell Henderson. And I know the matchup is tough, but I still think he's going to be okay. It's basically looking at the offense and the system as opposed to necessarily the player in the matchup. But I'm curious to see why you don't like Darrell Henderson. Najee Harris, understandably so. Brandon Ayuk has a quarterback change with Brock Purdy not expected to play, dealing with a concussion. Calvin Ridley we'll talk about, and then Michael Pittman, tough matchup for him as they take on the Saints. But why are you concerned about Darrell Henderson?
Let's start with this. 3 running backs have been beyond 10 non-PPR points this season against the Dallas Cowboys. Only James Conner has gotten over 15 PPR points. This is a good run defense. And we know that Darrell Henderson is going to split work with Royce Freeman. One of the things that you see coming out of that game last week is that Freeman was more efficient as a running back. The style of run that the Cowboys have a hard time stopping is something that Freeman was much better at last week than Darrell Henderson. So I'm a little bit nervous about him. He's going to need to get the hot hand again in order to come through. At best, a low-end RB2.
All right, so you still have him ranked as a starter, though, but just a little bit concerned about the matchup. Talk about Calvin Ridley, because I have him as a sit, you have him as a sit, but there is really no better matchup than what we're looking at here against Pittsburgh. It's been very favorable to a lot of wide receivers.
But what I'm worried about is that the Steelers will just emulate what the Saints did and what other defenses have done to Calvin Ridley, and that's press him. When he's been pressed, and it's happened on literally half of his routes this season, he hasn't been nearly as effective. A 44% catch rate when he's been pressed. So I think the Steelers are going to come out. They're going to try and take away Calvin Ridley. I think this opens things up once again for Christian Kirk to dominate out of the slot. And even though it's the Steelers, this vaunted run defense, I think Travis Etienne keeps this going. I don't think he's going to slow down anytime soon. And certainly if they're going to continue to play man coverage, that means they're trying to stop him. I don't think they'll be able to do it. I think Calvin Ridley is at best a flex.
I hope he has a big game because he needs it after what we've seen the last couple of weeks. Some sits for me as we take a look at the list of players that I'm trying to avoid. Geno Smith is on this list. I'm just not really feeling him as a fantasy quarterback because he has not been a good fantasy quarterback. A couple of running backs I would like to avoid: Javonte Williams and Brian Robinson Jr. I would start Darrell Henderson over those 2 guys easily. Amari Cooper, you take away the 58-yard catch that he had with P.J. Walker 2 games ago, and he's got 6 catches for just over 100 yards in his last 3 games without Deshaun Watson, and DeAndre Hopkins getting a bad quarterback situation with maybe a duo of Will Levis and Malik Willis. Geno Smith, you like him a little bit? I don't like him at all.
I don't really think I like him that much because of the matchup against Cleveland.
It's a bad matchup, and
Yeah.
he's just not been good. 1 game over 17.8 fantasy points, and I don't think this will be another good one for him against the Browns, although he does get DK Metcalf back, which is good. You like the fantasy conversation we have here? Check out our Fantasy Football Day podcast, wherever podcasts are found. We help you dominate your fantasy leagues like nobody else. We go 7 days a week to make sure your lineups are right, your ad drops are favorable, and that your matchups are set to go. The Fantasy Football Day podcast, wherever podcasts are found.